Hey everyone, welcome to the Elite Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Popple, and my co-host, William McClone, is running a little bit behind today, but he's going to try to jump on the episode with us. But we have an amazing guest today. Cole Sellazzo is the founder of Southern Acres Land Company. He focused on buying and developing, repositioning land across the coastal Carolinas. He specializes in finding undervalued dirt and guides it through due diligence, rezoning, subdivision planning, and then partners with builders or packages it with homes for resale. So I'm very excited because this is in line with what I'm trying to do. And so without further ado, welcome to the show, Cole.
Hi, welcome. Welcome to myself. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you joining us today. We talked to your partner Hayden Albert a few weeks back, and I mean, what a powerhouse he is, and it sounds like you might be half the brains behind the operation. So definitely want to find out more about what you do and how you get this land from raw dirt to ready to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Dirt's my game. You mentioned Hayden. If someone's listened to that episode, Hayden, we partnered together on some deals that generally involve land and homes, but he's the home expert. Just to start it out, I started like everyone does, flipping a couple houses, bought some, duplexes and quads and things like that. And, I learned a lot along the way, but what I learned from that process was that it was not something that I wanted to do at scale. Managing renovations on individual homes was not something that I saw myself doing like 20 of at a time. And so I was out in search of a different path. And the path I was looking for was the highest return on my effort. And so I didn't, you always have to pay your dues up front. When you first start flipping houses, you got to learn about construction, all of the things that go into building a house and, the things like that. But then a lot of people, you either take that to the max and like Hayden's doing, and you're doing 20 of those at a time, and that gets you to a nice scale. Or people will kind of move to a different, maybe they'll level up. Maybe they'll start doing new construction, and they'll build one house and then they're building more and more. And I saw that progression. And, I spent some time, I was still working a corporate gig, and I spent some time just looking for where I could use my skills and abilities best to get a higher return on my effort. And I found development, and we can talk about how that came to be. But the way I like to say is, if you flip a house and maybe you would make 20 or 30 grand, when we put together a neighborhood, we're trying to make 20 grand per house. There just happens to be 100 homes there. So
I love the sound of scale.
Yeah. So it's, one big project where you're going to maybe you only make 15 grand per house, just like maybe you only make 15 grand on a little flip, but we're doing them in chunks of 50, 80, 100 at a time. And so, I have to do less projects there, and I don't know if the complexity is more. It's definitely a different skill set, but it allows, that's my focus, is doing larger deals, get a little bit more scale. And so we have to do less projects to achieve, a scale level of income.
Yeah, no, dude, I love the sound of that. I want to back up just a little bit so viewers can get to know you. Where did you grow up, and what shaped your early views on business and real estate to, shift you towards the land development?
I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, still live here. If anyone's ever been to Charleston, it's blowing up, like Nashville was a nice town maybe 10, 20 years ago, and now it's just gone completely bananas. Charleston's the same way. I'd say it's kept a little bit more of a cap on it that prides itself on being like the classy city in the South. But what's generally happened is people will come vacation here to Charleston one time, and then they'll look to their spouse and say, honey, should we just move here? And then they do. And then, that just continually happens. So I grew up here, and when I was growing up here, we had these old bridges from the 40s. They were metal and sketchy and, 2 lanes. And then they put this big suspension bridge across the river from historic downtown to the suburb I grew up in called Mount Pleasant. And it went from my neighbor worked for DNR, and the other guy on the other side is a mechanic, to the people that own those houses today is a doctor and a lawyer, and each of those homes is worth about $2.5 million. So to stay in this area and make the money you would need to live in this now, this community has become very expensive around me. I had to level up the amount of income I was going to make if I wanted to stay here. And so I worked for 10 years. I had a good corporate job. I was making good money, but after about 5 years, I realized there wasn't really anywhere to go with that. It was a commission-based job, so they were like, well, just work harder and make more money. And I did that for a while. I made a lot of money, but I was like, am I seeing myself do this when I'm 40, 50?
Right.
Am I just going to die doing this job forever?
Got to be a better way to make money.
Yeah, and so, in 2017, that's when I started. I think I listened to 200 Bigger Pockets episodes.
That's a great start. That's where most of us got it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the story everyone goes through. I think I might have listened to almost every episode they had at the time.
I've listened to I want to say almost all the Brandon Turner era.
Yes.
That's the era of the Bigger Podcast side.
Exactly. I listened to most of the Brandon Turner era, and I was listening to things that I had no business listening to, like syndications, all the multifamily people. Like, I had no idea, but it got me to, it kind of introduced me to the whole, all the different things. Obviously, it had kind of a tilt towards burrs and, the methods that were made money in 2017, right? You could still do a lot of burring and flipping and things like that. And it was still lucrative and not as competitive as today.
Right.
Interest rates were low. So I did that for a while, but, I was looking at that thinking, this is just not going to do it. I'm not going to be able to, clear the level of income. It was just going to be to the frustration level, the amount of complexity when you're running that many flips and getting those deals and then selling them. Like, it was just more, I was like, there's no way.
It's a grind.
Yeah, it's a grind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us look at flipping that way because it's one of the better ways to get started because there's a lower cost of entry, do it per deal and stuff. But yeah, it's like once you kind of get to a point, where you're flipping enough to make a couple hundred, grand a year in profit. It's like to try to go from a couple $100,000 to millions in that game is tough because it's a lot of moving parts that are all very different, versus my experience now and start these new developments is like, once we're buying all the lots in the same area, we can build very, very similar houses and then kind of repeat. Like we use the same floor plan, like I think 5 times and just change the front on each one. No one knows until you walk the door,
Yep. So you've kind of moved up, leveled up to, like new development that or just home building, right? Home building, there's some repeatability to it, Yeah, every lot is kind of different, but at the same time, if you've got a building pad that's, 40 by 60 or whatever your dimensions are,
right,
you can use your same plans and then kind of rinse and repeat. So there's a little bit more scalability to that method.
Exactly. So let's get into the first exposure into when it was like the land development side. Like when was that turn of like, okay, I'm ready to move up to the big leagues?
So I decided that, I could flip houses, but I was buying from wholesalers and, I could see what these wholesalers were making. And so I bought a house from a wholesaler. He made $22,000. And at the end of my flip, I made $35,000, but I did a lot of work
and risked it all and carried that debt.
Oh my God. Yeah. The things I had to do to make that $35,000. And I was like, wow, that guy made 22 and I was happy.
Our stories mirror each other on that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to do direct seller marketing. That seems very achievable to me. And so I learned that business. I did that for a while and, got some deals, wholesaled them, did that. But I saw a similar path to it's just a hamster wheel. You're doing a ton of marketing, a ton of conversations, and each time you're hoping to make 20 grand. So you're like, and that thing has to keep chugging along. The marketing spend still has to go. You got to have, to get scale in that business as well, you have to have a whole floor full of guys, on the phones. The acquisition staff and complexity on that business is also quite high if you want to make, say, $1 million a year,
right?
Of net profit off of that. So, it was also being in the Charleston market. I mentioned this before, like it's grown fast, but like the fact that it's grown fast means that like it has been competitive because people are always moving here because it's nice. Mm-hmm. And so it was competitive in 2017, 2018, 2019. After COVID, people just started moving here in droves. You cannot keep houses in this market. I think that, Austin is always up there in the hot markets, but it's usually Raleigh, Durham, and Charleston that are the two fastest growing markets in the South. Mm-hmm. And so essentially, I guess I was not out competing some of the more established wholesalers. I was getting deals. I was doing okay, but I kind of saw it as like, wow, like I either need to go all in because I was doing this on the side still. I was like, I need to go all in and, build a huge sales team and have people in just doing marketing and like all this stuff. Or I need to find a different path. And so I went to, a mastermind and conferences, and I met a guy who was doing the same thing, but in land. And he was talking about how, how many wholesalers are in your area and how many nationwide guys are also competing in your area. And I was like, tons, it's tons. And he's like, well, have you ever met somebody who wholesales land in your area? And I was like, no. Or does land investing in your area? And I was like, I've never even heard of that. And so that person opened my eyes to the difference between land and homes and how, land felt like a little bit more of a blue ocean. There's less competition. It's more ambiguous how to price land because there's not a Zestimate. You got 10 acres out in the country. What's it worth?
Right.
How do you know? Right. Maybe your neighbor sold, maybe you think it's worth that, but no one really knows. So, the idea, so the next thing I did was I took my skills of direct to seller marketing. Instead of marketing for houses and people in distress, I was just marketing for land to get at a discount and to buy it outright, put it on the market at some near the appropriate price. So, when you're in the land investing game, you're trying to buy at 50 cents on the dollar and then put it on market at 85 to 90 cents on the dollar. Something where it'll move because it's a good deal, but you bought it at a really good deal.
Right.
And so I did that for a while. I liked that. That was a good, I think I like that better than wholesaling houses. But, that involves buying a lot of land with cash and then putting it on market, hoping it sells. And it was the same kind of thing where you have to do an immense amount of marketing, because most people just aren't interested in selling their land because it doesn't cost them anything to keep it.
Right.
In houses, you get distress, right? I'm sure oh, the roof's falling in, I can't pay my bills, like I got a tenant I don't like. With land, I mean, your taxes, especially in the South, is like $50,
Right.
So what, you can forget about it and just give it to your kids.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, I was doing that and still looking for, something that was going to be a higher margin play. And I actually joined a mentorship to learn how to be a developer of flex space, small bay industrial warehouses.
Oh, cool. What was that mentorship?
It was Hamza Ali's, I think he calls it Flex Space Connect now. He's out of Houston, Texas. I was one of his first cohorts that moved through, and he actually set up a really cool. I have no idea what it's like now. I am not, things change over time. This was a number of years ago. But at the time, there was not that many of us in the cohort, and they had a call every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. One day was with an engineer, one day was with a lawyer, one day was with she was an engineer, but she helped do like site layouts and like feasibility studies. And I'm gonna forget what the other one is. Oh, one day was with him on site selection.
Okay.
And so I just, I was in those every day, and I was every single day. And so for, I'd say 90 days, every single day every single week, I got an hour with a lawyer, and I'm someone who likes to talk. And so I'm asking all the questions, and I was just like, wow, this is just an hour for me to just ask this lawyer all the questions, and people would be like, all right, Cole, can we ask our questions now? And I'm like, hop on in, but you got to fight me for it. And so honestly, by the end of that, like 100 days or however long it took, I had a very good grasp of what each of those specialties did, how they all work together, and then what was required to do a commercial development and really just development in general, because we had talked in detail through all the phases and steps from contract, partnerships with the lawyers, to feasibility, to layouts, designs, software to use, the way to do that. And I put 2 different pieces of property under contract, started to raise money. We didn't get approval for one of them. And then I bought another piece of land to develop the flex space on. Still might, but the interest rates jumped. And so the investors were like, okay, these numbers used to work, but now it's a little different. I don't know if they work that well. So I put the flex space on pause, but I was doing the land, investing at the time. And so once I knew how to be a developer and knew how to acquire land off market, it was kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going to put these things together. And, I started to see opportunities like, oh, this could be subdivided into 8 lots. And then, I started doing minor subdivisions. And a minor subdivision is a lower threshold of what you have to do as far as engineering and things like that with the counties. And usually you don't have to put in paved roads, sidewalks, gutters, and things like that you do in a major subdivision. And so, I started doing minors, got to know that. And then, we started analyzing larger pieces of land. Does this 30 acres, how many homes could we fit on it? And started doing that. And then, just kind of moved up the value chain there at that. And so now that's what I focus on exclusively, is larger pieces of land that we can sell to tract home builders, or, production home builders is what we call them.
Right. Yeah. So tell us the story behind starting the company Southern Acres Land Co. and your mission from day one.
Yeah. So Southern Acres Land Co. was a move away from just buying land at a discount. It was the idea that you can add value through subdividing or rezoning, but that you can add value to land. Just like you would add value to a house when you do a renovation. The idea is that we would identify pieces of land that had development potential, and then we would help realize that potential, and that would be our margin in the value add. And I think the beauty of that is when I was offering people, when I was trying to buy their land at a discount, you're offering people half price. And so if they know what their land is worth, if they think it's worth $100,000, it might be, I have to offer them 50 or 60 grand, or it's not a deal for me. The beauty of having a value add strategy is, if I have a piece of property that can support a neighborhood, it might be worth $1 million, and I might be very happy to pay somebody $1 million for that piece of property, because I know if the county approves the neighborhood plan, it might be worth $2 million to a home builder, because it's however many homes, you know? And so I'm able to offer market value or above market, in some cases, value to the landowner because I see development potential in the land. And so I'm not coming in saying like, hey, sell me your land at a discount. I'm saying, hey, I can get you this big dollar amount. Would you like $1 million for the family farm or whatever it is, that 20 acres that you guys haven't touched in however long? And I can give them that big number, and I don't have to just, buy their equity essentially.
Yeah. So walk us through that. Because my next question was going to be about, how you, reposition the land, identifying the general process, in identifying the parcel to exit. But, so you identify the land and you see the potential in it. How does that go? Do you put it under contract and then work it through all the details while it's under contract and then execute it? Or, how does that work?
Yeah, I think the main difference between, when you're giving someone a lower price offer and you're shooting for people with motivation, like a cash offer for a house, for instance, or even for land, right? When we were making lower offers for properties, that is your terms, my price, right? Which you need money fast. I can get you money in a week or 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever it is, but it's got to be my price. And so this strategy is the flip side, which is your price. You want the most amount of money for your land, which I can get you, but it's got to be on my terms. So my terms are a development contract, and that generally has about a 90-day due diligence period. And in that due diligence period, we have to get surveys done to make sure the boundaries are correct, because maybe they haven't had it surveyed since their family got this land, however, 100 years ago,
right?
Sometimes. And we have to do, surveys. A lot of different consultants have to go and test different things about the land to make sure it's going to work for our plan. And then we have to come up with a conceptual and take it to the county and get some feedback from the county. Because if the county takes one look at it and just laughs us out of the room or tells us there's no way we're ever going to let you guys do that,
right?
I like to tell people, like, if they're not going to let us put a neighborhood here, I can't give you the neighborhood price. I'm going to have to pay you what a cornfield is worth, and what cornfields are worth per acre. And they're like, yeah, they're about $5,500 around here. I'm like, right. So I can only give you $5,500, but I'm also not a corn farmer. So like, I'm not gonna be able to buy it. If they won't let me, if the county tells me it has to stay a cornfield, then I'm stuck. We're not going to realize the development potential that I'm paying for. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we, in our diligence, try to select properties that we think will be approved. It makes sense. Counties have these future plans that they put out. Now it's like the 2030 plan or the 2035, whatever the year is. It's always what they think it's going to come in the future. And you want to kind of take a look at those and see, like, is this an area they want residential in, or is this some place, like some places they were restricting it, they want it to stay farmland. So I'm not going to bring them a neighborhood in the middle of their farm district, right? Because they're going to tell me no. But yeah, so I mean, the offer to the land seller is, we can get you this higher price. We're going to need time to prepare all these documents, bring it to the county and make sure that, they're okay, at least preliminary with it. And then if it's okay during due diligence, we'll commence the work to get formal approvals from the city, the county, the state, and if there's wetlands, maybe even the federal government. And once everybody signs off on the plan and then everybody's good, the feds are good, the state is good, the city and the county, once all those approvals come in, bingo, that's when we can close. That's when you get paid your, big check. And so that takes some time though. That's not, I don't think anyone imagines that the federal government moves quickly about things.
Right.
Right. So
especially now when they shut it down. So
You're right. Yeah. So like exactly. So and like our state governments aren't shut down, but they're so overloaded with everything that they do review stuff, but these things just take time. We're as fast as we can possibly be. Like when things come into my court, we're turning them right back around.
right.
But that just means we turn it right back around, and then we are just waiting. And then we send our follow-ups, and we're like, hey, have you looked at this yet? And they're like, you're in the stack. We're like, okay. And then when we get our answers, we move on to the next step.
Awesome. So for listeners who are listening who don't know what repositioning land really means, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that means there's two kinds. So we're doing residential subdivisions. So we're taking land and we're subdividing larger parcels, usually 10 acres and above, into residential subdivisions. And so our ideal subdivision is like any subdivision you've seen in your city or town. There's a sign up front that says, Meadow Acres or whatever it is. And you drive in, there's a couple of cul-de-sacs and there's houses and, it's just that's a regular neighborhood. Paved roads, sidewalks, those kind of things. And so the process of taking a cornfield from a cornfield to an approved piece of land, we have to lay out, the engineers put together very detailed plans that show the roads, the street lights. They show where all the utilities are going to go, meaning the water lines and the sewer lines. They all have to go, underground, and it all has to be part of an approved plan. And so the repositioning process is mostly that. And the repositioning can mean two different things. There's what's called a by rights subdivision, where you're subdividing by your existing rights and zoning. So we love a property that's already zoned appropriately, and zoning is just the laws that the local municipality has and governs what you can do on that land. You can't just buy any piece of land and put some heavy industrial warehouse on it. You can only do that in heavy industrial zoning. And likewise, you can't just buy any piece of land and then just drop 100 homes on it. You can only do that in generally suburban residential zoning. There's some zoning that is just for the city, like in the middle of town, in the middle of your city, whatever downtown you might live near, they're going to have different zoning where, you can put buildings right up on the road. Maybe you can go taller. And, if you live in a big city, like the zoning could have limits of like 50 floors and stuff like that. I don't mess around with going vertical that many floors. I'm generally working on the outskirts of town, in the areas where, growth is happening. It's pushing out into the suburbs, and I'm creating more suburbs.
Awesome. So how do you find undervalued land in today's market? Any tools, tactics, or data you use for site selection?
Honestly, AI has been a big help. One of the biggest difficulties in selecting sites is that every single municipality and jurisdiction has their own code book. And so you might be I'm in Charleston, so Charleston County, but we have little towns, just like everybody does, within Charleston County. There's this little town called Hollywood, South Carolina, not the real Hollywood. And Hollywood was a rural town forever, but now that Charleston's growing like it is, people are, it's pushing out that way. But, Hollywood barely has a website. And so like these are, they do have a zoning code, and they have just a picture of what their zoning map is. Most jurisdictions that are of a decent size are going to have a GIS, which is kind of like a Google Maps or maybe a Zillow looking thing, where it's a map and you can turn on and off different layers. They'll have a zoning layer. They'll probably have like voting districts and like, different things that the municipality cares about that are different layers just over their county. Okay. But these little tiny towns, they don't have their own like I said, they barely have a website. They do not have all these fancy things like a big county is going to have. And so the difficulty is when there's so many little pockets that have unique zoning. That town of Hollywood that I mentioned has completely different zoning than the rest of the county. And all the other little towns have completely different zoning. So one of the difficulties is you can know that zoning in the county, but every time you get into like a little pocket that's its own city, you'd have to relearn the zoning code. And so AI has been useful to we're able to put, just essentially link out to the zoning code for that, and it's able to digest hundreds of pages of that code, and we can query it and ask questions about we're essentially building custom GPTs or agents that know, like we just continually feed them the zoning codes for our target locations. And so we can ask it, hey, in the town of Hollywood, what zoning codes would allow us to subdivide up to a half-acre lot? And it'll just be like these, and these. And if I were to go and find that personally, it would take me a while, and I might miss some, because like I might only look at this paragraph and section, but it's digested the entire 300 pages. And so it'll give me this section and also the other two that were like 20 pages later that I missed. So it's,
what's funny is my partner Will here, his nickname around town is the Chat GPT of land. So
yeah.
Because he knows Escambia County in Pensacola where we're at. I mean, he's got that code book memorized.
Yeah, but to that point, it's only two, right? Like we have the county and the city, as opposed to for you're saying every single city has its own codes, which is similar here because we're in neighboring. Like we have a county to the north, to the east, and to the west. Nothing to the south because that's the Gulf of Mexico. But
Gulf of America.
Oh yes, and, sorry. And with that, I don't even really dabble into anything else because, to your point, which I was writing all of this down, is, I mean, I could use ChatGPT, but I feel really comfortable where we're at for those particular reasons. Like it changes so frequently that it could that one miss that you might make could be a very costly mistake in another county over or another city or municipality where now we can't do what we were anticipating.
Yeah. So, and we're really there when you're looking for like individual places to build individual homes, you have a much broader, like your metro is large enough that you can probably find like pockets. Even if you wanted like 2, 3, 4, 5, like you can always find infill pockets they're going to work. But they're just the number of actual parcels that would fit 100 homes on them is just so much lower that we don't just work the Charleston market. I live here and I love doing deals in the Charleston market. And it's my home market. It's the one I understand the best because it's the one I've worked in the longest. But I would say our best deals come from other markets because Charleston is so competitive.
Yeah.
And how many markets and kind of where are they in reference to you?
I would say it's coastal Carolina. So I like to stay in the coastal plain. If you guys are in Florida, everything's flat. But in South Carolina, there's the coastal plain, which goes about halfway up the state to Columbia. And then it starts to be the foothills, and then you get into the mountains. I personally don't like dealing with a lot of topo. And so I do not play around in Charlotte or Atlanta. I go essentially up the 95 corridor. So all through South Carolina, up into Fayetteville. And then as soon as I get close to the Raleigh market, that market's hotter than Charleston. And there's people there with like the difference between Raleigh and Charleston is Raleigh has like Fortune 500 companies that are moving their headquarters over there. So they have an immense amount of outside money from like investment banks, you know? So I offered a guy $12 million for a piece of property up there. I underwrote it at 9, and I was like, if I can just get this thing, it's gonna be 200 homes. I know I need to offer him 9, but I'm gonna offer him 12 just to win it because I was just going up and up and up. I didn't win it. The guy who won it paid $16.5 million.
Jeez.
Wow.
I'm like, I literally, my underwriting said 9. How in the world did you pay 16.5? Like,
right, you're already over 33% from what
I was way out over my skis. I was like, I'm just hoping that this is still going to work. And I mean, that kind of told me what I needed to know about that market, which is that like,
stay on back south.
yeah, right. Like somebody was willing to do that project. I don't know what his numbers looked like or but I clearly, so I still will do deals in Raleigh if I can find them, but I'm not aggressively marketing there because it's crowded.
Yeah. Well, no, we have similar. I mean, where we are in Pensacola, we have a very great affordable pocket. You shoot over an hour and a half to 30A, it's a whole different ball game. Like
heard of 30A, yeah. If I've heard of 30A, then yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's here our nicest houses might reach the $1 million, $2 million. I mean, on the water we can get 3 to 5.
Sure.
30A, they got townhouses that are in multi-million dollars. So it's
crazy.
It's funny. I was talking to a builder there today that denied a build at $950 a square foot. He said we really got to get $1,150.
Oh,
it's like what?
$1,150. Okay. I don't know what kind of builds those are, but that's crazy.
That was in Alice Beach specifically, but I was just talking to someone maybe 3 hours ago about that, and I was like, that is unbelievable. A foot.
That's nuts.
Ridiculous homes, but yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. So tell us about your team's approach. Move fast, keep things clear, execute with precision. How do you balance speed and structure in your development model?
I would say that, balancing speed and structure, like a lot of every production home builder has their own internal, acquisition team, right? They would ideally love to find all their own deals. Our thesis is that home builders, especially the publicly traded ones, but mostly any home builder in general that has like a lot of scale, if they're a production home builder, they have to build homes. If we have a downturn or whatever it is, like they are still going to build homes. They're not going to go start making cars. Like they build homes. That's what they have to do. They have to keep doing it. Otherwise, their shareholders are going to fire the board or the CEO or whoever. So knowing that, I really like our area because the numbers, the migration numbers tell me that my area in particular, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Fayetteville, Raleigh, the South in general, this area, people are moving here. They've been moving here for quite a while. And I personally don't think that they're going to quit moving here because it's just nice. Like the weather and all the good things, right? So we are a deal source, a provider of projects to home builders. And so I don't see their demand going away. And I see that if they may stop building in some areas of the country, but I don't think they're going to stop building in this area.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a pretty defensible position. And so, we are different than they are in that we do a lot of upfront targeting of our parcels. So we do a lot of front end work determining like the 200 parcels, for instance, that we would want in the Charleston market. And those are our target 200. And I know some home builders might do this, but they have acquisition guys that come in and they come and they go. Our idea is that we want to do data analysis on every parcel that fits our metrics and say yes, no, and grade it so that by the time we have completed that analysis on a region, every parcel has been looked at and validated. And then we just, anything that scores like a 10 through a 7 is marketed to and just is continually marketed to until they sell or until the end of time.
What exactly are some of these parameters? I know I'm jumping in late. Sorry about the tardiness, but what when you're looking, let's just use this example, like you're saying, 200 acres.
200 units.
Or sorry, 200. Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, so that was
units
200. That
fit.
was 200 of like the parcel, because Charleston's a relatively small market. There's probably only 200 pieces of land specifically, whether
That
it's
you're gonna be
one
able to
piece
build.
or multiple pieces put together that are all owned by somebody, an assemblage that would work for a neighborhood.
Yeah,
And
and
so-
then how are you cross-referencing and developing this list to target?
So the easiest way, I don't know if you were here for the buy rights or the rezone conversation, but the
I
easiest
was in the
way
back. Yeah.
is that if it is to look for things that you can do by rights. It's already zoned appropriately
Mm-hmm.
for, a sufficient level of density. There are a lot of places where, the growth has exceeded any by rights, anything. But you can look on their future use plan, and if it says, this area is going to be neighborhood subdivisions, suburban residential, that would be a target for a rezone. Because it's probably ag land, just because everything in the South is just ag or timber, until it's not. Like, there's always a base zoning level that everything in the county gets if it doesn't have if it doesn't have anything else. And so usually that's some sort of agricultural designation. And so, our first thing is to look for what could be subdivided by rights. Those are the easiest ones to identify, because if you've got, 30 acres and you could do half-acre lots, maybe that yields like, 40 or 50 homes, whatever it is. Maybe the density numbers can be different. But, that's the first test is doing the math on what does the subdivision or what does the zoning allow for density, right? Is it 4 homes per acre? Is it 10 homes per acre? Or whatever it is, how many acres is it? If it's 10 homes per acre and we can get 10 or 12 acres, we're going to have, that sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Like, we're probably going to be able to make a decent sized community in there. And so that's probably going to be a target. The next thing you're going to look for in the by right situation is there water and is there sewer nearby? Very important for these neighborhoods, because you can put together a well and septic community, but it needs to be out in the country. People want more land, in the Raleigh market. That's actually more acceptable because their growth has outpaced any amount of infrastructure that's possible. But in the Charleston market and most of the other South Carolina markets, home builders are somewhat willing to accept a septic system, just because we don't have, they don't always run sewer lines way out to where people still want to live.
Sure.
But they generally want city water. Because putting a well in each house,
so expensive.
Well, yeah, and people don't really like well water, like it's comes up. It's just not something you want on a new construction home, is to do well and septic. If it's a well and septic area, we're probably looking at manufactured homes. And
how are you getting away with manufactured homes? You just create a manufactured home community? Because I know in Florida specifically, the expansion of mobile home parks is not allowed.
Like, you can't put new mobile home parks on the ground anywhere in the country. It seems
anywhere. It seems like
it's not forbidden in South Carolina. Someone brought me a deal where we could have expanded a mobile home park, and it's just not my game.
Sure.
I don't really want to have to learn mobile home parks and get into that, because like, you can't do that. Like, they're only going away. That's why that's such a hot asset class, because these mobile home parks, like, we have them here in Charleston, and I mean, there's guys that are sitting on these mobile home parks that are in the middle of town, and eventually they sell to someone like me, because I'm offering them more than the mobile home guys, because we can put like a bunch of houses in there. And take the mobile homes out, and all of a sudden it's a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's how exactly, and you probably mentioned it, sorry, but just high level, how exactly did you get into your sweet spot in this exact niche? Because I think it's really cool. Land acquisition is really unique, and the fact that you're capitalizing, which you just mentioned a little while ago, on focusing just to an area that's not going to slow down. So these publicly traded builders, like you said, they have to keep building to answer to the shareholders and the board, except, and so they're always buying these huge, pieces of land. So were you in the production side before, and that's what, and you kind of just niched down, or what exact, like, how did you find this? Because it's such a unique spot, especially because you're able to take a large area, let's say Greater Charleston, and niche it down to 200 build boxes that fit what you're looking for. And then your underwriting and your negotiating skills have to be far more advanced than these huge, large companies that have land acquisition guys, because then they're just going to come to you as opposed to doing the deal directly.
It all started with his Flex Space Connect mastermind.
I love it.
Yeah. Like I pumped those guys for all it was worth. That mastermind really allowed me access to just grill an engineer, a couple different, engineer, an architect, lawyers, and so like the founder was always talking about path of progress and
you
identifying.
You said the founder of that was Hamza Ali.
Hamza Ali, yeah.
That's where he learned all about development and general specific geared toward flex space, but then took it all back to the land side in the Carolinas.
I love
that. And that just got me to kind of think about being a developer. A lot of people meaning like my customers want me to deliver build ready home lots. I am personally not interested in getting so. I run an entitlement shop, and so that means I am getting this land entitled, rezoned, all of the engineering drawings approved by the county, the city, the state, and the federal government. Everyone gets approval, and we have these approved construction drawings, and then I am turning it over to the home builder as soon as the bulldozers are ready to start pushing dirt.
Gotcha. So you're not doing any of the horizontal infrastructure at all.
No.
You're just prepping everything for undergrounds to go in.
Yeah, and so they want me to do that.
The best way to do it. No, you don't want all that liability and all that.
I have a partner who is probably 20 years older than me, and he was active during the 2008, housing, everything, and he got stuck holding the bag, and he knew a lot of people that got in really bad shape, because if you imagine, even on a small community, I have to pay the land owner off, own this land personally, and then have a multi-million-dollar construction loan, probably debt with, lenders as well. There's a lot, like millions and millions of dollars in debt while I'm doing the horizontal construction, which for horizontal, for anyone who's listening, is the underground utilities, putting the roads in, and getting everything pad ready. And the vertical construction is what the home builders do, where they come in and they go vertical and they build the houses themselves. So they would love for me to deliver pad ready lots. I'm personally just not interested. I'm just too risk averse in some ways to want to be the one holding on to like $4 or $5 million in debt, and then we go to war or COVID happens or there's another 2008, whatever it is, and my builder disappears and I'm stuck holding the bag and have to pay these investors back $3 or $4 million.
Sure.
Right. No, that's definitely scary. So keep going. I want to keep diving into your process. I know one of the big deterrents or things that kind of can mess up a deal is wetlands. So let's talk a little bit about wetlands, drainage, and local landscape. What makes you so intentional about these things? And can you share a specific example of a project where your respect for the land made a difference in terms of that?
Yeah. So you guys are coastal. I'm coastal as well here. The geography we have on the East Coast of the United States, especially in the coastal plain that we're in, is that, we have rivers that come down from the mountains and they kind of do the river delta thing and they spread out when they get to this flat coastal land. And so the cities along the coast, Charleston, especially Wilmington, North Carolina, is very similar, and Myrtle Beach and Savannah are all based around big harbors, right? Large rivers that meet the ocean. And so those rivers and all the tributaries that go up inland create lots of federally protected wetlands. And so the federal government has jurisdiction over wetlands that connect to a navigable body of water, meaning like you can take a boat up it. And so when I say we have to get federal approval for things, I'm not saying that I got to go ask Congress or anything like that. I'm saying that the Army Corps of Engineers has to approve your impact plan to wetlands.
Sure.
If it's determined that it's federally jurisdictional, if it's in the federal jurisdiction. And so being that my target areas are coastal in this, flat area in the Carolinas, or in Georgia, it's the same thing. We just deal with a lot of wetlands. Wetlands are the biggest part of our underwriting because you can look at a map and, whether people use land ID or whatever it is, it'll show where they think the wetlands are. And so, we might look at a piece of property and then in the map says there's a big green bubble around this area, and maybe a third of it looks like it's wetlands. Well, when we get the actual boots on the ground out there and we have an environmental consultant go walk the entire property, they're looking for indications in the soil and in the plant life that's living there, and then in the hydrology, like is there actually water in the ground? And so those three things will determine whether it is or isn't wetlands. And invariably, I don't want to say invariably because I can tell sometimes that it's not going to be, but it's always worse than what's on the maps.
Oh yeah,
always.
Oh yeah, we had
a few deals like that.
We had a slam dunk deal. It was it was 2 lots that it was 1 lot that was approved to split to 2 lots
for duplexes.
That was zoned where we could put duplexes on them.
Great.
It was great. Everything was great. We were so excited to close. We were even going to pay a little bit more because we wanted it, and it was going to be awesome. But as it runs true, like you're saying, we knew there was a little bit of wetlands from the GIS that the county had, but it was in the I'm talking the very northeast corner, and it was just barely touching it.
We were thinking worst case scenario would still get a duplex and a single family, that was
and then the entire lot was wetlands when it came back, and I was like,
no,
what's this? Yeah, so we obviously didn't close
that contract and appreciated the due diligence money that we spent.
Yeah. So we get into, when you're doing these big projects, you can get sometimes it can make sense to impact some wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
A good example of that was we're doing a 40 home neighborhood in Charleston, in North Charleston, which is very in town. But there's wetlands on it, of course, right? There's wetlands on everything, just about. And so to access one other piece of the property, we could, there's not enough room. The wetlands, they wiggle and they, squiggly lines go all over the place. To just get to this other piece of ground, we had to impact under 1/10 of an acre of wetlands. And so we had to get the, government approval to do that. And so, in your case, right, it might not make sense to go through all this trouble for 2 lots, but if you were to get that, if you went back to that seller and renegotiated and said, this is wetlands, no one's gonna be able to do anything with it, and they decided, I agree, and they would give it to you for a song, you can pay to mitigate impact on wetlands.
Yeah.
Right. So like maybe it doesn't make sense for your small scale, but I see it all the time with larger developers and larger communities. Like, how did they just blast through all those wetlands? And so the way they did that is they said, we will fill these wetlands in, but we will buy credits to offset it and make and protect other wetlands in other places. And so, you know, whatever the wetlands credits are going for in your area, it's just a cost and a time thing. You know, might not have been worth it for you guys, but if someone's putting together some big master plan community with 1,000 homes in it, that's not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But those people, you know, they're working on that thing for like 5 years. So,
Sure.
you know, for them to iron out some wetlands and like add in a couple $100,000 in wetlands credits just so that they can like, you know, put another like wing on the neighborhood, like it probably makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
But my preference is to leave the wetlands as unimpacted as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to cross over, especially if you've got like a thin strip that cuts across your property, you know, and you've got the front and then you got the back. I'm not gonna, you know, like we have to cross over. You know, if there's 5-10 acres in the back that's high and dry, we're going to impact it just to put a road across, just so that we can, you know, we'll put a road with a bridge on it, you know, to get to the back. And so that's considered an impact, but like we're not planning on filling in the whole strip and just, you know, running roughshod over it.
Yeah. Now, whenever you're going through the mitigation process, have you ever ran into any unknown issues? Because here, like all of the credits, they go pretty much to the Everglades in Florida, and you're paying like a pretty high premium, and it didn't make sense on that deal. But like you said, I mean, these huge developments that are happening in Tampa and Miami, anywhere on the Atlantic coast, Jacksonville is just expanding, and Jacksonville's not a few hours, 3 or 4 from you.
Yeah.
So obviously those areas are running into the same issue as well as all across the panhandle, but it's not cheap. It is not cheap.
It's not cheap. It's about maybe $60,000 an acre. And so, you know, that makes sense if you're just having to access, like if that unlocks other high ground, it makes financial sense to do that. You know, obviously if you're doing high rises and stuff like 60, who cares about $60,000 an acre kind of thing? Like,
sure.
You know, who knows what, like I've seen what some of those guys in like Brickell in Miami are paying per, you know, lot. And it's just like nuts. Yeah. It's like $30 million for a quarter acre or something.
Yeah, it was actually just
so crazy.
A couple counties over recently, they just sold 4 acres in Destin, Florida for $84 million.
See, if those guys have to deal with $60,000 per acre in wetlands credits, they'll pay it.
Right.
Was that the across from the Harbor Walk?
The developer sold it back to the state and the city.
So good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a whole that we got to do an episode on that deal, dissecting it. But yeah, that was just a point on the highest value land I've seen an acre locally.
Yeah, high level. He bought a premium piece of property that has direct access to the Gulf, and he proposed and got all the engineering for the tallest, like I guess it'd be a skyscraper, but like condominium complex that would block all of the current condos. And I mean, who knows if he was actually even going to do it, but
there was a lot of not in my backyard people not wanting that in their backyard.
Yeah. And then and then somehow it went all the way to where the state wanted to just protect the whole land. I don't know if it was the whole city of Destin and the entire community was like, no, we can't do this. And yeah, so now the state is purchasing the land back to be a park.
Somebody with a lot of pull is behind that. I
Yeah,
don't know your politics,
That's
but
what we got to do some deep diving on, studying some political donations. And
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, this
Because,
sounds like one of
I
the
feel
guys
like-
that
I
owns
think-
one of the existing condos is a billionaire.
it was a it was a very polished developer buyout, so. But man, back to being about you. You mentioned working with builders or packaging lots. What kind of partnerships do you look for in doing that?
I look for, I think it helps that I came from a corporate background. A lot of people that come into the space that I'm in, they came through maybe a construction background, but I worked as an auditor who was serving like Fortune 100, 500 companies, General Motors, Whole Foods, Coca-Cola, and a bunch of industrials that you probably never heard of. But, I was interacting with people at a very corporate level. So I speak corporate. And I think that's very helpful because a lot of people struggle interacting with these corporate home builders because they're like, oh, they have to get all these approvals and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, of course they do. Yeah, duh, it has to go to the other department. I totally get how it works internally with these home builders. So I do think it's helpful to have an understanding when you're dealing with a corporate entity, what putting together a multi-million-dollar contract with them is going to look like, so that you're not surprised that it went to legal and came back with markups, and that your guy doesn't really have any pull, but maybe his boss does have some pull, because there's internal politics and how to get buy-in from a corporate setting, for, a project that I want to go forward. So, working with a corporate buyer is a unique piece. I look for somebody who is going to pay the most amount of money on the best contract terms. I think we're all looking for that, right?
Right.
That makes sense. That checks out.
Yeah. I do value, whether or not they're going to close, but in general, my buyers, unless I'm going with somebody really small, if I am selling something to Lennar, I don't think Lennar is going to just disappear tomorrow and not be able to put the money together,
Yeah, they would send you something kind of straight up of we can't close it because of XYZ.
Yeah, they might bill for a different reason, but it's not because they don't have the cash, you
Right.
know?
Mhm.
And so that's not really the concern, is that they don't have the cash. If something changes in the market, I don't want to be, what I have heard is there are builders, if they have 10 properties under contract, are letting the bottom two go. And so they have long contract terms, they'll hold on as long as they can, but they're just not fulfilling on the bottom two. And they're offloading it to someone else. Maybe they're assigning it to another builder if they can. But there's been a couple of projects that have been locked up for a long time locally that have transacted like that because they're kind of the bottom tier, and they move generally from a larger production builder, one of the big corporate guys, to maybe a mid-tier or maybe kind of a more local shop who's willing to do the project.
No, that's cool. So you built some supporting brands like Azzo Capital, Breezy Stays, and Charleston Truck Ventures. How do these complement your land development mission?
After COVID, I saw the short-term rentals was just going like that, right? And so that was actually the first thing I did when I left my full-time job. I was like, I think short-term rentals is going to be the thing. And so I left my corporate job and I designed some short-term rentals, meaning buy some property, redesign them, come up with an interior design, put together a bunch of back-end systems to, handle the client experience part of it. And luckily I sold out of all of those at the peak. when I had like a trailing 12 that looked immaculate. But right before the Airbnb bust, when everyone kind of like was like, wait, our revenue's down 20%. And then the next year is down 20% again.
You're a lucky guy. I still got mine. I'm still making money because I bought them really right, but not nearly as much as the peak.
My family still owns some beach condos, so like, you know, I set up the systems right, and so like they're not that hard to run. My wife still does some of it. We'll probably put a VA over it eventually, but just the communication back and forth to give it a personal touch. But I also decided, like house flipping and everything else, that like I do not want to be in the hospitality business. The margins were not there. The margins were there for me buying things and making them into good Airbnbs with good interior design, good systems, and then having like good revenue to show and selling them. So like that worked. Essentially like a very high touch flip. Like the highest when you flip a house, like you just have to put a kitchen and a bath together. When you're doing an Airbnb, you have to fully imagine how someone is going to use it and like make it function seamlessly for a guest stay of 6 and like have enough towels and enough cutlery and enough seating in the fire pit and like all the things. So those were the hardest flips I ever did.
Right. I'm with you. Like I said, I'm still in the space. I got keep inventory of water bottles and cookies and crackers that I have for welcoming packages.
Yeah. So we still have some of that going just because the beach condos they're easy. Those are not like things that are going to go away. People aren't going to stop coming to a beachfront condo.
Sure.
They're not.
And then
we don't have nearly as many as some of the Florida beaches or maybe Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. We have very few. Charleston has very few beachfront condos, which is kind of unique. So it makes them they're good things to hold on to long term. So that is something I did for a while, and it was fine. We made money doing it, but I'm glad I got out when I did.
And Charleston Truck Ventures, that's
yeah. So the truck lot, that's great. That is a industrial outdoor storage, which I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it is very popular because the cash flow is just fantastic on a piece of dirt.
And what's it look like? Is it a gravel lot with a fence or what?
It is a gravel lot with a fence. It was an existing truck lot, and it was owned by a guy who was a truck driver. He was in the industry, and he was kind of it was kind of done, but at the same time, it wasn't done well or right. If he's listening, I don't think he would disagree. He was just kind of renting it out to like people he knew, buddies. People would text him, "Hey man, you got some space in the lot." So we, that was actually a deal that Hayden's team identified, and it was land. So he brought it to me, and he's like, "What can we do with this?" And I was like, "Dude, it's a truck lot, like, but we're buying that." He's like, "What? Why?" I was like, "Well, let me tell you what that thing's going to cash flow when we get done with it." So we bought it. It already was a gravel lot. It already had a fence around it.
So those were the two biggest expenses to get going done.
Gravel lot and a fence.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but both of those needed repairs, upgrades, these things, right? So we needed about $20,000 in additional gravel and grading. And it's only a little over an acre. It's like 1.5 acre lot. So it's a good amount of gravel it needed because it was gravelish dirt / mud. And the fence likewise didn't work. So, it was just like stuck in the dirt and mud. So we had to dig that fence out so that the gate could slide. And we're putting an automatic gate on it right now. And so we're using truckbays.com, and that is something where it's kind of like an Airbnb situation where you go in, you buy a night, you get your gate code, you show up at the gate, and it automatically, when you approach the gate, the app will know you're approaching the gate, and it will open it for you if you've paid it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so there's no keypad at the lot. it's literally just like you have to have the app and you drive up to it and it will open automatically.
I knew there was something out there like this, and I'm totally glad you gave me this website because I'm gonna go deep dive later because I was totally curious.
I love it.
How
it's fantastic.
Because I've definitely heard a couple Bigger Pockets episodes over time on this is kind of in the industrial flex category. It's like this and lots, and so I love
this. This is iOS, industrial outdoor storage. Charleston is a big port. Charleston and Savannah are some of the 2 deep water ports in the South. Obviously New York and Norfolk are ones as well. But so we have a lot of containers that move in and out, and a lot of guys that live locally, and you can't park a big rig in a neighborhood. You know what I mean? So like there's a need for people to park their rigs overnight and then go home, or just leave their rigs when they're not taking a trip. And so
interesting.
we redo so the steps are we redo the gravel on the lot, and you put the fence in, or you put the gate in, the gate mechanism in, and then currently we're doing some like final. We had added more gravel, but we hadn't pushed it all the way up to the edges of the lot. And I, on Monday, actually was out there laying out the parking lots because I paid for some software and laid out the maximum density of parking spots that we were going to be able to get. And it was 31 spots. And so we then ordered curb stops, and I was going to use curb stops to define each of these parking spots and number them. But when I started doing that, I realized that, the gravel really needed to be more uniform and go all the way to the edges, because our parking goes all the way to the edges. You can't just have it turn into dirt and mud and, someone pulls into the back of the spot and just like sinks it.
Right.
Or, I'm putting the parking stop in there in mud. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. So they're going, I think tomorrow or the next day, they're going to finish out the gravel. And then, we're going to have 31 numbered spots that are laid out like very intentionally. Whereas before, people were just pulling into an empty lot and parking willy-nilly.
Right.
And I think they only got like 12 trucks in there when they were just kind of doing whatever they wanted.
So this is huge. It's like 2.5 times what you guys been doing then.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know what kind of capacity we're going to stay at, but, max capacity on this is like $8,000 a month. And I think we'll probably settle around like $5,500 to $6,000 a month. And I think, we might be in this thing for like $400,000.
Dude, Will, that's the new dream, bro. All we gotta do is maintain gravel and a fence. Like,
I know
that's
talked about that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we talked about that at Pine Forest.
Right. No, we did. Yeah, I mean, we had 2 acres. It potentially in the future was more residential use, so we got rid of it. But that's definitely a prime idea for the next one. Well, man, we're going to bring you back in about 12 months to hear about the update on this lot and how it's working, with truckbays.com, because I'm definitely interested.
This, and this is, I'm a big proponent of hiring offshore talent. Everyone I do business with, I find them an executive assistant, or I'm like, you need an executive assistant, because I'm convinced that like as soon as anyone reaches any level of scale in the real estate business, there's so much transactional busy work and paperwork and just things. I think, if you guys, I don't know what your revenue numbers look like, but you should read Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And that book changed my entire way I run or think about running a business. And I was hiring for another role. And then I read that book and I was like, I stopped hiring for the other role and immediately went and hired an executive assistant. And it has allowed me to probably triple the amount of work that I can personally do, because you just don't realize how much time you spend saving files to the drive. And like, if you're doing a closing, they need your LLC documents. Are you sending those? I'm not the person who responds to my email. I respond, but let me rephrase that. If someone emails me, I am not the person who reads it first. My executive assistant reads all the emails first, responds if she's able to. If it's a simple document request for closing or something like that, hey, can you send me the layout for this neighborhood? She just fires it back. Can you send me the LLC documents for this closing? Fires it back. I only look at things that she has tagged that are needing my review. And so I don't know what y'all's inbox looks like, but before this, I literally would just spend my whole day just looking at my inbox, waiting for things to ping me because they were just constantly flooding in. Mm-hmm. And now I, have sections of my day where I deal with, emails, but it's not my to-do list anymore.
That's awesome. That's incredible because it's just always flooded.
Always.
And then I have a big pet peeve of having things unread, and it helps me personally. It helps me know when I have or have not responded to something. So a lot of times I will read something, and if it takes a lot of thought or process to answer, then I'm like, mark unread.
And that can be your process, but like the way it works for me now is I'm only dealing with the emails that are like complicated like that.
High level, right? I'm saying that I need to get to that. I just have a personal it's like a pet peeve of mine to have things unread because I feel like, I always feel like I'm trailing. So I definitely need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know if you guys asked for book recommendations, but I have a stack of them over here because
I was going to get to that. Yeah, we're like 2 questions away. I already was going to question if you read Blue Ocean Strategy because you mentioned the Blue Ocean.
Yeah, I did
earlier there. So yeah, I was already picked the brand. But before we get to that, where do you see Southern Acres heading to in the next 5 years? Expansion, new markets, larger scale projects? What's the plan?
5 years is hard for me. That's a really long time. Like, who knows? But
give me the next 12 months.
The next 12 months is I'm currently hiring a full-time land acquisitions land acquisition specialist. I need a guy. Our targeting is getting really good. We've got a good process. We've got a lot of parcels that we have identified. This works for a neighborhood, or it should work. We need to do more due diligence, but we need someone to be reaching out to, these landowners and just building a relationship with them. And I can't be doing that. I need someone out there full time. Start with one person. That role is because we're doing such large, high margin deals. I don't know if you guys have acquisitions people or if you run your internal, or maybe not, but if you pay your guy 10%, like as an acquisitions person, and we make $1 million on a deal, he gets $100,000 check.
Right.
So, it doesn't take that many neighborhoods for him to be making more than all of the people he knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to paint that picture for people to come on board and do this. A lot of people, I'm not offering a corporate job with a high salary, and a bunch of benefits. And, if you level up, you can get this. My offer to someone is you come on board, you can make a whole lot of money. If this is something that you like to do, if you're willing to work at it and just connect with these people and, make these offers. So, next 12 months is to hire at least one person, maybe 2 people to come and do that full time and get another, probably we were doing a run rate of 2 a year and then 3 a year. I want that to be more like 4 or 5 a year, and then bring someone on to help me with entitlement as well. And at that point we can do more. My niche is, I don't want to be doing master planned communities. I don't want to be doing multi-phase communities where, it's 150 acres and, 700 homes can go in there and we have to piece them out. The way that works is just the financial structure of that. You can make, life-changing, lineage-changing money doing that. But you get into the same thing where you have to hold that on your books. And, if you're halfway sold through and then, stuff goes down, you could be
You're
left
on the
holding
hook.
the bag on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the hook.
And so my concept is, generally 30 to 200 homes, whatever can be done in a single phase by a builder, where they'll take it down and build them all at once. Not necessarily all at once, but like all together. They're not going to build phase one and wait and then build phase two. I want to do single phase communities. And so when I think of it, like, how am I going to do? It's like, how many am I going to do? I'd like to do bigger ones. I'd like to do 150, homes, pushing up on the higher end of a single phase construction, because the more scale, the more money we can make generally. So I'd like to do bigger deals. But really it's just, I want to staff up so that I do less day to day all the time and make more of a business out of it.
So and that kind of goes to the next tipping block around 200 homes. That's usually.
I don't really want to go above that. I think over 200 homes, you're tipping into multi-phase neighborhoods. Phase one sells through is phase two.
So the sweet spot for you is 75 to 150.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I love how you explain that, because my first question in my mind was like, why not go for the big stuff? But having to worry about the debt structure and the extra complexities with that makes sense.
And I'm also competing directly with people who have much deeper pockets, more experience, and are corporate, right? Like we had Lennar just bought 1,000 acres for, I can't even remember how many millions of dollars. I'm not competing with Lennar,
right,
to offer them tens of millions of dollars, for 1,000 acres. Like that's just.
So part of your reason for choosing that niche is it's kind of like a sweet spot between small people and the monsters out there. It's that that box right in between.
Yeah, exactly. They're happy for me to bring them a shovel-ready project of that size, but it's not so large that it's on their roadmap or their radar, right? That 1,000-acre tracts that Lennar bought, they were probably fighting all the other builders, the D.R. Hortons and everybody else that's big enough to buy that, and everybody knows about that 1,000 acres.
And the other thing is that you're competing directly for your end buyer.
Yeah, I don't want to compete. Now, I will compete directly with them. One of the things about not being corporate, which I don't think I mentioned before, is that they have strict controls about what they can put in their contracts and what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
If an acquisition guy wants to do something unique, he doesn't have to go ask corporate. He just has to ask Cole. And if I think it's a good idea, we'll do it. Like we did a deal with three brothers they had this land, but they didn't have any money. And they were like, we need money to pay the light bill. And I was like, the light bill? Okay. So normally a contract that's long-term like this, you put money in escrow with the attorneys, it's released maybe at a certain date in the future. And they were like, no, we need money like at signing. And we need money every month just to keep the lights on. And so we just wrote into the contract that we would sell every brother $1,000 a month just to get them through. And that's not, money with the attorneys, no deal. That's just, they keep that money. And I just saw it as even if we do our due diligence and it turns out we can't do this deal, we'd be out. It's three brothers. So it was $3,000 a month,
like $9,000 if you did it
right.
for 3 months.
I was it's $9,000. It's fine.
When you're transacting $1 million, $9,000's, drop in the bucket.
Yeah, exactly. And even if they had wanted a little bit more money, it was kind of but that was the thing is they had talked to every builder because this is a big piece of property in the middle of town. Everyone had talked to them, D.R. Horton, every home builder, right? But none of them could just be zelling them money to their bank accounts.
I love it.
They wanted cash, and I was like, guys, I'm not driving to your house every month. I'm just not.
Me too. You know.
Yeah, they were like, you got to bring cash, and I was like, dude, I am not showing up with cash on your back porch. Like, we got to figure out how we can do this where I can just like, I'm not Venmoing, but like Zelle is bank to bank. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Right. No, I love that because yeah, I mean that's such a great tip, and how you work that in a way that that the big guys couldn't do it, because that requires so much oversight and so many legalities involved in trying to give people little pieces of money, especially when it's 3 separate brothers. So it's like that's just such a cool way of like how you beat out the big dogs for prime real estate in the middle of everything.
Yeah. And so like there's times that'll be the difference maker. And then, there's times when the big guys will just win out because they can pay more because I'm looking for margin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I need margin on the entitlement. They don't care about getting margin on the entitlement. They just need a project to build houses on.
Exactly.
So, if I'm in a head-to-head battle with a home builder, it's going to be really hard for me to get it under contract and then like make enough money to sell it back to the same home builder.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a little bit of that in like, I am looking for people who haven't been directly approached or my approach can be better in some way than a corporate buyer.
Sure.
No, that makes sense. As we kind of head towards wrapping this up, what's some advice you'd give to a young developer or an investor who wants to get in the land? And this is where I love any books, habits, mindset shifts that helps you win in this space.
I think the first thing is if anyone like I love referrals. So if there's anybody out there that's in markets around me, Georgia or any of the Carolinas, that has a piece of property that they think might work, I'm not personally underwriting these things. I have an entire team that does the underwriting. So if you want to email us at like land@southern-acres, send it over and we'll send you back what we think, is possible on it. We're doing a deal in Columbia, South Carolina that came off a referral, and another one in Florence, came off of a referral as well. I think, just constantly learning. I've read most all of the top business books and things like that. The space I'm in doesn't really have a lot of like education to like go and just seek it out.
Sure. I was going to ask you, are there any books on land development that you read specifically? Because I haven't really seen a lot.
No, there's not. I read a number of books on development in general, how to raise funds, actually putting together a fund versus raising LP versus like putting together and raising like $8 million was something that I was looking to do for the flex space build. So I looked into that. Development specifically, you can start learning how to do this on like what you guys did with the lot that had, you do a simple subdivide. I think that minor subdivides is the way you learn how to do major subdivides. You either learn how to do major subdivides by working in another business that's already doing that. But if you're going to learn it yourself, you do some minors, right? And so I started out doing minor subdivides to put mobile homes down. And so we would do 5 lots, and those 5 lots would be for manufactured homes. It's not in a park. They're just maybe acre lots, 2-acre lots, a little outside of town. And you put a nice brand new Clayton home down and someone's got a nice little piece of land, right? So you do a lot split to start, right? You guys have probably looked at lot splits or even done them before. Those are the simplest. Those generally take almost nothing to split one piece of land in half. And then you can do a minor subdivision, which depending on your area could be 4, could be 6, could be 10. We have some areas around us where you can do up to 10 or 15 without having to pave the roads and go into a major. And so
that's nice.
If you do a number of those, you can get to know the process, how the wetlands work. Maybe you have to do a stormwater plan for some of them. Maybe you kind of start learning how to do some of the things that are necessary for a major. And then, once people know you're doing subdivides, you're kind of hoping that either you stumble upon one or someone brings you one that has potential for like 30 homes or 40 homes, something like that, like a little bit big enough to make sense to pave the roads, but not so much roads that, it doesn't make sense at all. And so, maybe you do a 20 home townhouse community with like 600 feet of road or something like that in it. And, there's in most markets, as long as you're like in a growing southern market, there's people locally that would love to gobble up a 25 unit townhouse community, right? And just, you don't have to go to the big dogs for that. There's local guys who would absolutely love a project of that size. So that you kind of level up like in that regard. And then when you feel comfortable, like there's not that much difference between like 50 homes and 100, like it's mostly the same. And so that's why I like staying in single phase, because, once you kind of understand how to do a major, you're doing mostly the same things. When you get much bigger, you got to start thinking about like putting amenity centers in and these kind of things, which is a little bit different.
Yeah. Doing all different types of things like pools, parks, a whole bunch of dead space of where you can put more homes.
Yeah. So like on a 50 home community, you're not putting a amenity center, you're not putting a pool and tennis and that kind of stuff. But when you get into these bigger communities, you have to start thinking about some of the other things. And, those are exciting. I'm happy to do those, but they add complexity to a project.
Sure.
And so, I'm just kind of staying in my niche.
No, I love it. That's the best way to grow. And it sounds like you don't have any difficulty offloading these either, right?
Individually, there are projects where we think it works. We're underwriting it. We're looking around and we're like, yeah, I see another neighborhood over here, another neighborhood over here. And these builders are looking at sell-through rate, and they have a lot better handle on the sell-through rate of their competitors' neighborhoods than I would. Like I have some data on that, and I sometimes I think we know. I'm like, yeah, I'll bet a builder will take it. But there are certainly times where it could work, but the builders are like, yeah, that's just one exit too far up the highway. Yeah. They're like, so-and-so built something off that exit and it took them forever to sell. And I'm like, yeah, they were like 1,000 feet off the exit and they were way off in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, yeah, but my corporate, they're going to look at that and say, this community is not a good comp. It took them forever to sell. They had to do price reductions. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm right off the exit. And that was 2 years ago. So like I can plead my case, but there are times where, there's not a ready buyer for the parcel because maybe we're just too early for that area.
So what do you do in that scenario? Do you just cancel the contract and
we drill some dry wells, right? And we also drill a lot of dry wells where, we do all the things and like the wetlands comes back terrible, but we've already paid for a bunch of studies or, we do a bunch of things, but it's not, there's always when we're doing our diligence on the front end and the whole project, we're looking for deal killers. And so they happen. Sometimes you stumble upon them and you're like, the deal is dead. Like this is an insurmountable thing. Obviously the wetlands is like, that's an early deal killer. That's one of the first things we always say. But, there can be other things that can kill a deal and we could be thousands of dollars into the process and, $30,000, $50,000 in, and it's, we just have to kill it off. But in general, I'm not taking on major neighborhoods unless we're planning to make $500,000 or more.
Sure.
So
you can have one or two duds as long as you got a winner at the end of that.
Yeah, and the duds are not generally $30,000 or $50,000. That's really far to have something fall out. Right. Generally, we're spending, $2-3 grand on a wetlands. It's no good. Maybe we spent some money on a wetlands and an initial survey on one, and we're like $6 grand in. That wasn't good. We can do that a bunch of times because when it does work, it works huge.
Sure. And generally, how many contracts do you have actively under contract throughout the year? And what's your since you've been doing this, what's your highest volume of sales?
I mean, it varies, right? Like we've had times where we've had a ton of things under contract and then they just all fall out.
Yeah.
Like, and then we're just like back to our 2 neighborhoods that we're currently doing, not just 2, but like, we always have a couple that we're currently working on that are like, working their way through the process.
So there's always at least a couple under
like
contract, in due diligence.
These things take between 9 and 18 months.
Sure.
So, 9 is fast. That's a buy rights. Just get it done. 18 is like we got to do a rezone and like, ask a bunch of stuff. So there's always things that are under contract at different stages. Like we have one that's going to sell in the next like 45 days. Very excited about that one. And when that one's done, I mean, yeah, I'm looking for like what's going to replace it because we have some things under contract, but you can't rush them. Yeah, but like, we're not sure yet because we're still doing diligence if they're going to work, right? We've got 115 home community. It would work really well, but it's the closest sewer is almost a mile away. So we have to determine like, yeah, I'm underwriting it with what I think the sewer is going to cost. I still think we're going to make $2.5 million, right? That'd be fantastic, right? But I could be very wrong on my sewer estimate. Like I could easily be $500,000 to $1 million off, depending on how much it costs to pull that sewer down. And
now,
because
are you working with certain people that are doing undergrounds, or are you?
Yeah, I have a specific engineer that just does our pump stations.
Sure.
So we have our general engineer who will lay out our neighborhoods and things like that. But generally, when you're going a mile, you have to have a lift station and force that to go the mile. Like there's like I've said before, it's very flat where I'm at, so there's no drop. There's no gravity.
Where water can.
Yeah, you're not going to get a mile of drop. Like I can't imagine how much you would need. Like it's not going to happen. So to go a mile, we're going to have a pump. And I'm just assuming the pump is going to cost $800,000 to $1 million. And I'm assuming that the line is going to cost $50 a foot. And so, for 5,000 feet, maybe it's $250,000. But there's a lot of assumptions built in there, right? I could be wildly off with the pump requirements. Maybe the pump has to be super oversized because of the distance it's going. Like I've never pulled anything a mile long. I know developers do it all the time. I just haven't personally pulled a mile for sewer. So like I underwrite this thing and it looks like we're going to make all this money. But when this is one of those cases where like I could get pretty deep into the cost of engineering that project and then find out it's not viable.
Yeah, there was a previous guest that we had on here that was in a similar situation and it was like a 23 or 27 lot neighborhood.
That's too small.
But then it was going to be like $300,000 to get all the utilities pulled, and that was crazy.
I had a 45 lot townhouse community in Columbia that the town or the county was telling me that they only allow one pump design. And it was the pump design for like a master plan community, like enormous with all these fail safes and like gigantic. And our engineer is like, there's a local engineer too. They were like, there's no way that's $1 million pump. And you're talking about like 44 or 45 townhouses, like this little tiny nothing project like that could serve like 1,000 homes. And I was like, yeah, I know, that's crazy, right? And they could not get through to him. And we actually found the pump. I forget what they call it, but it was the pump and the sewer engineering firm that serviced and designed all of the pumps in that county. And we found that particular vendor. And that person had a relationship with the county where they were like, "Oh no, that's crazy. You don't have to do that." And I was like, "They're telling me we have to do it." And he's like, "I'm gonna call Janice up. She's not gonna."
I'm gonna call Janice.
And I was like, "Please
Someone
call Janice. Like that would be amazing."
Yeah.
And so he
And
got us a dual grinder pump that was going to cost like $75,000.
Oh my
And
god!
I was like, "Oh my god, this thing went from like totally not viable, but it took us like
925,000.
yeah, right. It was a crazy swing because it was not viable with a $800 or $1 million pump station. It's a tiny project, 40 some homes. There's no way. I had underwritten it for 150,000, thinking we'd need a small pump, and so like 75 plus the extra plumbing, like we got pretty much back to my underwriting number, and the project was back on track. But we spent about 4 months. I spent about 4 months just like stressing that we were like $60,000 and deep into the engineering on this project. And like, we were just going to have to walk away.
Yeah, that's tough.
So yeah, that saved it. But like, if we hadn't found that person and had the relationship, it would have been a dead project.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that's How did you get to that point? You just were pulling a lot of strings, like
Yeah,
much as you could.
We kind of realized that, our engineer was local, but like their specialty was not these pumps, right? So like this was in Columbia, which is the state capital in South Carolina. It's a smaller town than Charleston. And, we were like, we need somebody who is very, like, essentially we were looking for that local connection,
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of people who specialize in just sewer pumps, and like sewer design. So like, I wouldn't say it was like impossible to find this person, but we kind of like looked at some local projects and who was doing the work on those.
Sure.
And their name kept popping up. And so it was like, okay, well, if they're doing all the work locally here, we were kind of going to all the local firms and asking them, could they help us? And then when we talked to them, they were like, oh yeah, we're the so-and-so provider for that county. And they kind of, were like telling us about it. And I was like, well, sounds like you guys are the people to help us. And, we got into that conversation and they were like, oh yeah. And so that's how the conversation went. And it was kind of like a problem solved, but
That's massive.
I would not have stayed in it if we hadn't been that deep in the engineering.
Sure.
Right? If we had, I honestly didn't think they were serious earlier on when they told us we needed that massive pump. I was like, yeah, they said that, but like, no one's going to stick to their guns on that. And they stuck to their guns for like a really long time.
Man,
Wow.
Janice, she didn't want you to have it.
No, dude, she really was adamant. And then she just wasn't anymore. She's like, oh, they designed a thing. Like if they say it's good, we're good with it. And I was like, wow.
That's a summary of dealing with any kind of government worker in general. Like they're so in the box that they can't think outside the box at all, and so until the expert who created the box tells them that you're allowed to think out of it.
I think that's exactly what it was. They were like, we have this thing, we have to go by it. I can't approve anything else there. But then the guy, like you said, the guy who designed the box for them was like, oh, here, actually, I would prefer if we did this thing. And she's like, well, if this is the guy, if he says it,
this is the guy.
Yeah.
Man, this was a lot of fun. We definitely went into overtime because you had so much good information. We couldn't cap that. So I love it when, like I said, the information is just so good. Before we wrap it up, where can listeners reach you or connect with you? I know you dropped your email. If you want to drop that again, so if they want to learn more about land, talk about deals, or bring you stuff, where can people reach out?
Yeah, I'm active on Instagram. I'm starting to do more on LinkedIn because I have corporate buyers. It is kind of a corporate world that I work in a little bit. Getting active on LinkedIn. So, I have a pretty unique name. If you look me up, there's no other Cole Sellazzos out there. But if someone's got a land deal, they can send it to land@southern-acres.com. But other than that, if you want to DM me or send me a message on any of the socials. I've been putting out a decent amount of content out there, just trying to tell people about, the different minor subdivides we do or major stuff too. And just get my name out there.
Cool.
Dude,
I
that's
just
awesome.
I just followed you on Instagram so that way we can stay connected. Because yeah, man, I definitely want to stay in touch and probably pick your brain more in the future. And honestly, have you back on again because I mean, I know with where you're at in this game and what your goal is for the next 12 months. I mean, it sounds like business is going to be doubling here before we know it. And
That's the goal.
I also want to hear more about how this truck parking worked a year from now. Now that you're on the website, got the parking spots maximized. I mean,
Yeah, the truck lot's really a proof of concept.
That's a whole other topic we're gonna have to go into.
Yeah, the truck lot's really the reason we bought like a 1 acre lot is I needed a proof of concept and I needed to understand myself how to systematically, just like when I created my first Airbnb, I ended up using HostAway and like a PMS and all that stuff. Like I needed to learn the equivalent software and systems around a truck lot. So the goal on this one is we're gonna get it leased up, get it stabilized, and probably honestly sell it. And then find bigger lots. And when we find the next bigger lot, we'll have the track record to show a bank, and we can go get real true bank financing or big time investor financing to say, lend us $2.5 million because this thing's going to make $80,000 a month or something.
I love it.
Yeah. Definitely going to talk more about that. But like I said, his Instagram is just Cole Sellazzo. Found him on LinkedIn. And so it's definitely easy to find, easy to talk to. So definitely give Cole a shout, especially if you got any land leads in the Carolinas or surrounding areas. He's hot on that. Now, if you got any land leads in Escambia County, Florida, around Pensacola, that's when you call Will and myself. So you can go to the eliterealestatepodcast.com, shoot us a message on there because all your land leads within the Pensacola and greater Pensacola area we're interested in. If you need any building supplies, you also message us. So message us at the eliterealestatepodcast.com. Attention, William McClelland, my partner here, will hook you up with all your building supply needs. He is with Dufresne. So pretty much he can quote everything for you. He'll point you in the direction if it's not something he carries. But definitely if you're in new construction or doing rehabs, you need some supplies, he can definitely get you the best prices, especially on hardy board. I know he gave me some quotes today on lumber for my personal renovation I'm doing. So I'm excited to work with them. So that's why I'm definitely sharing it on here. And then as always, if you guys are hungry and need healthy food on the go, stop at one of my Clean Eats locations. If you're a busy professional, you shouldn't be cooking for yourself. Your time is way too valuable. So that's when you come into one of my restaurants in Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida, Shalimar, Florida, or Tallahassee. Because like I said, you need to stay working. Let us do the cooking for you. We got you at Clean Eats. Did I leave anything out, Will?
The only thing was, I know that Cole had mentioned he had a stack of books, and we always like to hear these book recommendations. So far, I've got Buy Back Your Time, Blue Ocean Strategy, and I know you said you had a stack. So
I have a stack just of Buy Back Your Time, and I give it out to anybody who I come into contact with. You guys should read it. That's my one recommendation. Okay. Every real estate investor should read Buy Back Your Time. Dan Martell is from the tech space, but it is so applicable to the real estate investing business, whether you're a home flipper or a home builder, whatever it is, everybody needs to read that book because it just changes how you think about your day-to-day. And getting an executive assistant is not that expensive, and it changes your world.
Okay. And if you need a personal assistant, we actually got the hookup on that too. So just shoot us a message. We can get you a personal assistant out of Egypt that speaks perfect English, hardly any accent, for right around $6 an hour. If you want the hookup on that, shoot us a message on our website, theeliterealestatepodcast.com.
That's killer as well. I mean, that's the whole idea, right? If you can have someone do all these like busy work tasks for $6 an hour, like that'll be a game changer for you or anybody.
Definitely. Well, dude, I can't thank you so much. Thank you enough. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. I hopefully in 12 to 24 months, we're able to combine forces. We're bringing some deals down south. Then we can start looking at some opportunity that way, because that's what I like. I like land acquisition. I like assessing deals. Everything I've done is extremely small in comparison to what you you're doing, but ideally we're getting towards that. So
Yeah, that's what it takes, right? Like I was saying, you start with small deals, like 2-3 lots, one, whatever it is, and then like someone brings you something that could be 8 or 12, and then just goes from there.
snowball effect. I love it.
Yep.
Well, dude, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. We definitely enjoyed it. Definitely want to stay in touch. Like I said, I'm an Instagram follower now. Let's stay connected on there.
One more.
Like I said, this was awesome. So we appreciate everyone for listening in to the Elite Real Estate Podcast. Please tune in next week. We got more amazing guests on the way that know so much about their different topics in real estate. We're definitely on wanting to talk to a lot of developers. So if you're into land development and you would like to be on the show, also feel free to message us on our website. But Cole, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, and we can't wait to have you back on a future episode.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see everyone next week.